A new search underway to find the next top cop of San Diego. The timeline for recruitment as Chief Shelley Zimmerman prepares to retire.
It's sausage, you know? It's like all of these kind of pieces come together and they look terrible. But hopefully, you know, what the city is doing is guiding you through a process. By the end, it makes a lot of sense.
Taking a closer look at a Mission Valley makeover, the market in a development plan to help make this neighborhood a better place to live.
The effect it's had on this community, it's become a drinking destination as opposed to being a arts and crafts community.
A debate over last call in San Diego. The changes in Sacramento that could let bars serve drinks until 4 a.m. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. The high-profile case of a young Mexican who says he was deported from the U.S. in February had his first hearing in federal court today in San Diego. Juan Manuel Montes had DACA, an Obama-era immigration status for people who entered the U.S. illegally as children. KPBS Frontiers reporter Jean Guerrero has the story.
Juan Manuel Montes was the first person with an active DACA status to be deported from the United States. His attorneys at the National Immigration Law Center say he was unlawfully removed from the country, and they're suing the government on his behalf. During his first hearing in federal court today, they asked the judge to let Montes return to the U.S. immediately, citing irreparable harm he's suffering in Mexico.
Juan Manuel Montes was detained and whisked away out of the country without an explanation, without the ability to see a judge, without the opportunity of even saying goodbye to his family. This all happened despite the fact that Juan Manuel was a DACA recipient.
For now, the judge declined to rule on whether Montes should return. He says the case deserves a trial to examine the facts. The judge asked the parties to meet tomorrow after discussing how long they'll need to prepare for trial. Then he'll determine whether Montes should be allowed to return on some kind of parole in the meantime. His attorneys say every minute he remains in Mexico is causing him and his family irreparable harm. Montes has a learning disability and has lived in the U.S. since he was 9 years old. He claims he was deported while awaiting a taxi in Calexico, where he was visiting a friend. He lives in the Imperial Valley and was working as a farm worker to fund his college studies.
He has grown up here in California. He lived with his family happily until the expulsion that night of February 18th. He is very close to his family. He was working hard. He got up every morning, just at the crack of dawn, 6 days a week, to go work in the fields of the Imperial Valley, picking fruit and vegetables.
Montes has declined to speak to reporters due to stress. The government also declined a request for comment from KPBS, citing its policy of not commenting on pending litigation. Hundreds of thousands of young immigrants in the U.S. are eligible for DACA, and 40,000 of them are in San Diego. From the federal courthouse, Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
California's Chief Justice of the Supreme Court expressed concerns today that immigrants in the country illegally are avoiding the court system. Federal law allows ICE to engage in immigration enforcement at state and local courts, but Justice Tani Cantil Sakaui says this increases public safety risks for everyone because crimes are going unreported and criminals are not being prosecuted.
For effective enforcement, there are policy discussions that should be had. Well, we can't force federal government's hand, but it is the voices of our representatives, of our decision makers, of our population that changes the unwilling.
Justice Sakaui says everyone in California is entitled to legal protection, regardless of how they got here. Los Angeles is looking to join a lawsuit over the Trump administration's policy on restricting funds from public safety grants to so-called sanctuary cities. The LA city attorney says the grant conditions are unconstitutional. San Francisco and the state of California have also sued the federal government over the policy. The Navy says the remains of some of the 10 missing sailors have been found. They disappeared after the USS John McCain collided with an oil tanker near Singapore. Navy divers found the remains in a flooded compartment of the damaged destroyer. The Navy has ordered a broad investigation. Yesterday's accident was the second major collision involving the Pacific-based 7th Fleet. In June, 7 sailors died when the USS Fitzgerald collided with a container ship near Japan. The city of San Diego is letting the public weigh in on the search for a new police chief. The first of a 3-part series, public meetings will be held on September 21st. Current Chief Shelley Zimmerman is scheduled to retire next March. Once city officials pick an executive recruitment firm, they hope to have a new chief selected by the end of January. In California, bars typically close at 2 a.m., but a proposed bill in California is trying to change that, extending the closing time to 4 a.m. The bill has passed the state Senate and is currently under review by the Assembly. People rallied today opposing the bill. KPBS's Matt Hoffman has more.
Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill!
Supporters of the California Alcohol Policy Alliance gathered on a Hillcrest street corner Tuesday, voicing their opposition for extended alcohol service. Lisa Bridges is with Community Action Service Advocacy for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods.
The degree of quality of life is going to continue to decrease, and that just doesn't make any sense.
The Alliance claims longer alcohol service hours would result in more violence and an increased burden on law enforcement, something former Hillcrest resident Lucky Morrison says he's experienced.
The effect it's had on this community is become a drinking destination as opposed to being a arts and crafts community.
If passed, bars wouldn't be allowed to automatically stay open until 4 a.m. They would have to obtain an additional hours permit. Local State Senator Joel Anderson co-authored the bill and says the approval process means, quote, local law enforcement and community leaders all have to agree before the proposal goes to alcoholic beverage control for further review. Chris Shaw owns 4 local bars, including Urban Moe's and Hillcrest. He says he doesn't see any downside.
Our businesses are so regulated right now. So staying open until 4 o'clock is really not a big deal. I mean, the police department and the ABC, the Alcoholic Beverage Control, they really control how many security guards we have to have, how our patrons act when they're outside the building. We have to have so many security guards on the outside of the building as well. So from 2 to 4, it's not much difference.
Other owners we talked to say they simply like the idea of having the option to stay open later, but would want the communities to be on board first. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
San Diego's Mission Valley has reached a turning point. With more housing being developed, it's expected to go from a shopping destination to more of a community. But what about the abundance of traffic and a shortage of public spaces, schools, and parks? In the second of a 2-part series, KPBS editor Tom Fudge looks at what's missing in Mission Valley.
This is the Target off of Mission Center Road. Now, Best Buy is only about 200 yards away, but there's no straight shot if you want to walk there because their parking lot is fenced in. So to get from Target to Best Buy, you got to cross 2 huge parking lots, take a right on Mission Center Road, take another right, wade through Best Buy's parking lot in order to get there. This isolation of big box stores and other developments is seen all over Mission Valley. Often the only connecting road between places is the highly trafficked Friars Road, which itself is notoriously hard to cross. Mike Stepner is a faculty member at San Diego's New School of Architecture. He says Mission Valley has developed as a series of islands.
We looked at everything on a project-by-project basis. This is an island. You're building this shopping center, and but we didn't think about how it connected to the housing next door or the stuff across the street.
Stepner calls Friars Road a disaster that doesn't solve congestion but promotes it. He thinks the Green Line trolley needs more stops in Mission Valley. Many planners say it also has to be easier for people to find the existing trolley stops, which are often well hidden with no obvious paths leading to them. It's hard to go north and south in the valley, and it's another thing that prevents bikes and pedestrians from navigating the place. A proposed connecting road across the river from from Fenton Parkway to Camino del Rio North has been on the books for a long time, but the cost and controversy that comes with building anything have stalled the project. Stepner is optimistic because the market is making it very clear that reliance on cars and an oversupply of often empty parking lots is not profitable. Stepner says the answer seems to be infill housing and a better way to get around the valley.
But it has the potential for all of that. And I think that as the market really begins to recognize that, maybe the push will be to make those improvements that we know are needed, and maybe that's going to come out of the plan update as well. But we just haven't done yet.
Today, the market is already telling us that retail, that decades-long transformative force in Mission Valley, is overbuilt. The rise of online shopping is hurting department and big box stores all around the country. The closure of the Macy's store in the Mission Valley Mall is just one example. Nancy Graham is project manager for the city's Mission Valley Community Plan Update. She says nobody is going to tell you that retail is going away.
We definitely want to keep retail as a thriving use in Mission Valley, but we want to right size it. As you downsize those stores to fit what the market is, it leaves this available space. And so then the question is, what do we want to fill that in with?
Another thing that is driving the overall process is San Diego's Climate Action Plan. Nearly all of Mission Valley is defined as a transit corridor because of the Green Line trolley. Under the Climate Action Plan, that means the valley needs to create a development plan aimed at reducing vehicle miles traveled. Graham says you do this by making it easier to walk, bike, and take mass transit. You do it by converting parking lots to different uses. Graham spoke on the back veranda of the Mission Valley Library. The view from there shows the trolley in the foreground and the river in the background. Graham hopes, in the end, Mission Valley will become as special a place as the library.
This building that we're at today, the library, is actually one of the most beautiful buildings in Mission Valley, and it's a real treasure. And the community wants to see more of that. They want to see development investing in creating a special place, whether that be through architecture, whether that is creating new park space along the river, and really creating a place that you want to be as opposed to a place that you drive through.
Rob Hutzel is the head of the San Diego River Park Foundation. He says his goal is to see the development of 60 acres of river parkland in Mission Valley, whether it's on the old Qualcomm Stadium lot or elsewhere. He's also a member of the Mission Valley Planning Group. When asked how that plan was going, he says,
it's sausage, you know? It's like all of these kind of pieces come together and they look terrible. But hopefully, you know, what the city is doing is guiding you through a process. By the end, it makes a lot of sense. But quite frankly, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me right now.
Tom Fudge, KPBS News.
California raised more than $640 million this month auctioning off permits for businesses to emit greenhouse gases. It's part of the state's cap and trade program, which was extended through 2030 last month. The goal is to reduce emissions, and the money raised goes to projects like high-speed rail, public transit, and housing. The cap and trade program is a key component of the state's climate action plan. Climate-friendly policies help boost economic activity as well. A UC Berkeley researcher found they generated more than $9 billion in California's Inland Empire since 2010. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has the story.
The nonpartisan group Next 10 funded a study of how the Riverside and San Bernardino County economies fared under the state's climate-friendly policies. A UC Berkeley researcher found that the state's cap and trade policy helped. Bethany Jones says that funneled investments into the region's transportation sector and into clean energy. The state's policies led to more than $9 billion in investments, and that helped create more than 40,000 jobs.
Both the San Joaquin Valley and the Inland Empire have really strong solar and wind resources. And so a lot of the investment from the state has gone to those regions, and that is the largest contributor to the net economic benefits in both regions.
The construction industry benefited the most from the renewable fuels construction boom. However, fossil fuel industries were hurt during that same period. They lost nearly $2 billion in sales and more than 1,100 jobs. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
The University of San Diego has gone green, and it's paying off. According to rankings published today by Sierra Magazine, USD is the 10th most environmentally friendly college in the country. The college received high marks for food handling, innovation, and planning. Leading the rankings were College of the Atlantic in Maine and Green Mountain College in Vermont. This week's weather is going to be nice and dry with lots of sunshine. Erin Calandra has more in tonight's forecast.
Well, taking a look at our satellite right now, the last couple of hours, we don't really see much going on. Maybe some pop-up showers and thunderstorms in the mountains, also in the deserts. Along the coast, though, certainly it is nice and dry. Plenty of sunshine throughout the afternoon. So as we take a larger look here, we do see some spotty activity in the deserts. We have this moist air returning from Mexico. Well, that's going to contribute to some pop-up thunderstorms, mainly in the evening hours. It's a bit wet in places like Utah and Nevada. So for us here tonight, 68 degrees. That's the overnight low. Becoming cloudy. Again, when we wake up, of course, it's going to be cloudy as usual along the coast. And then it's going to break up and we'll have plenty of sunshine. Oceanside 63 degrees, Poway 64, Alpine 59 degrees tonight, Borrego Springs 78, and Mount Laguna 58 degrees tonight for our overnight lows. Tomorrow, Oceanside and San Diego, we're at 76 degrees, Poway 81, Alpine 83, Mount Laguna mid 70s, and then Borrego Springs, we are still in the triple digits. Here we are with our 5-day along the coast. We are in the 70s, mid 70s. Much of the week. By Saturday, we reach nearly 80 degrees. Plenty of sunshine, so beautiful conditions to head to the beach. Inland, we are in the low to mid 80s all week long with plenty of sunshine again. We reach it to the 90s by Sunday. In the mountains, it is very comfortable. We're in the 70s through Friday, and then we're in the 80s by Sunday, 88 degrees, so that's a bit warm. In the deserts, triple digits all week long, and again, by Sunday, we're at 112. The low on Sunday in the deserts, 82 degrees, so it's going to be a bit toasty. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra.
Do they honor Southern heritage or glorify racism? That's the question being argued across the country. AP reporter Marina Hutchinson says Georgia's Stone Mountain Park is now at the center of this debate, as home to one of the biggest Confederate monuments in the U.S.
Etched into the Georgia granite, the carving of 3 rebel leaders on Stone Mountain is one of the biggest Confederate memorials in the country. The high-relief sculpture of Confederate President Jefferson Davis and Generals Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson is bigger than a football field.
We're kind of proud to have this because a lot of people that come from out of state or out of the country, this is kind of like one place that it's definitely on our list to come and visit.
Some of those visitors unaware of the park's Confederate links or come for its other attractions.
It's a massive work and it's a piece of art, I would say.
The surrounding area, once a stronghold of the Ku Klux Klan, now home to an extremely diverse population.
It has since changed, I say, over the last maybe 15 years. More blacks have moved into the area. We come up here, but we don't really recognize the memorial. It's like something in the back of our mind.
Now, Stone Mountain has been swept up in the growing calls for the removal of Confederate symbols on public lands. Last week, Democratic candidate for Georgia Governor Stacey Abrams called for the carving to be removed after the racially charged violence in Charlottesville.
We cannot celebrate those who tried to tear apart our country and those who defended slavery.
The idea of a memorial began in the early 1900s, around the time the Ku Klux Klan was experiencing a rebirth.
The Ku Klux Klan was reborn on top of Stone Mountain on Thanksgiving night, 1915, and that sort of energized the site itself as a place for a carving to honor the Confederacy.
But it would be decades before the carving would be completed. And since its unveiling in 1970, the carving and nearby Confederate flags have been a regular point of conflict between those who see them as honoring Southern heritage and those who believe they glorify racism. The Stone Mountain Memorial Association recently denied the Klan's request to burn a cross at the park in October, citing problems last year when pro-white demonstrators clashed with opposing groups. In a statement, the association said it condemns the beliefs of the Ku Klux Klan and that denying the permit is in the best interest of all parties. As for the carving, under Georgia state law, it cannot be removed or concealed and will be preserved as a tribute to the heroism of the people who died in their cause. Changes to the law are seen as highly unlikely.
I wish it could be removed, ideally.
I don't think history should be ever erased because we never want history to repeat itself.
A dilemma echoing across the South. Marina Hutchinson, The Associated Press, Stone Mountain Park, Georgia.
Making people think about everyday places differently. An Albuquerque artist is doing just that with his lifelike paintings. He says his goal is neither to praise nor condemn society. Instead, he works meticulously to reflect American life.
The places that I paint tend to depict a sort of North American purgatory, and it's a little existential sliver that we spend most of our lives in. I'm thinking of where we're going to be or where we were before. These places are built almost like an architectural instantiation of that state of mind. These sort of nowhere places are all over the United States. And I both like and dislike the little chill that I get inside a Costco or a grocery store where I know I could be in New Jersey or Arizona or Washington or anywhere. And I think that that kind of anonymity of being like nobody, being nowhere is one of the sort of horrors of the modern world. But I think it's one of those things that you can only have an idea about in the abstract. I work in sketchbooks pretty constantly. That's really important to me, to really sort through my impressions in a visual way, to think things through visually. And drawing is the most important way for me of thinking things through. There was something about what I saw that made me want to paint it. And am I getting that across as best I can? Am I making it as resonant as I can? And the only way I know really how to make sure I'm doing that is to start drawing and get it out of my head. Being from Albuquerque actually factors into the way that I make the paintings. There's about a 2,000-foot variance in altitude. You're about a mile above sea level, and the air is very dry. So you can see whole weather fronts rolling across the landscape. So you're always aware that you're about this big. And that makes sense to me as a worldview and manifests itself in the way that I scale the figures to the painting. Materials are really important to me. The quality of paint makes such a huge difference because the more pigment it has in it, the less physical paint you have to use to get the saturation to a certain point. I also like to paint on materials I know they're going to be permanent. The painting on the easel is on dye-bond aluminum. A lot of the time we'll paint on polyester stretched over panel. And I like the polyester because it's more inert than canvas or linen, so it doesn't expand and contract. Color is emotionally engaging. Putting out a little dot of cadmium red on the palette, I get very excited. I like sort of geeking out about this stuff. Sometimes people will say that the paintings look like a photograph, and they'll usually mean it as a compliment, but I take a lot of pains to take out things that photography does. Light is really great subject matter for painting, and really something I spend a lot of time on working out in the paintings. All the parts of the painting have to agree to convey a sense of light. It's like a crime where all the alibis have to match up, or you don't get away with it. These paintings are really built almost like one-frame movies. I basically have to sort of build a set, light it, cast it, put the figures where I want them, because I want the figures to help guide you through the space. Reading is a way of ascribing meaning that's less open-ended and interesting to me than the way things look, which is also why I muffle the text on the paintings a lot. Painting gives you these sort of sensations, and for me the sensations are largely visual. The light on these big empty stretches, rows of boxes and concrete. I want to invite you into the painting and keep you there as long as I can. So I want to make these spaces sort of like how I experience them. I like these places to be drawn from the sort of middle ground of common experience. If you go too high or too low, you play into people's fantasy lives, which is narrative poison to me. If I paint USA Gas, the painting has a really good chance at being more of an experience you have when you're there. The subject matter is in service of the painting and not the other way around. I don't mean it to be entirely a critique either. I'm American, so I'm a little bit embarrassed as an American about Costco. But I'm into Costco. I like it. And if I'm not both a little bit in awe of the place and a little bit ashamed of the place, then I don't stay engaged in a way that I would be interested long enough to do something like make a painting. I'm not trying to praise these places, and I'm not trying to condemn them. I'm trying to convey what it is about the experience of these places that fascinates me. It is a mix of awe and shame and these big deep spaces. It's sort of like a desert there. It's like the inside of a Costco is like a little mini desert. So maybe I just feel at home there.
That story was from Artbound, a production of KCET in Los Angeles. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.